It's coming up to 11 months that I've been living in Costa Rica. And so I thought I'd reflect a little bit on how I ended up here, what it's like living here, and for all of those of you in the comments who have been saying, make a video about Costa Rica, here you go. I had been living in LA for really about 7-ish years as an adult man doing my music thing. And although LA was my base of operations, I would obviously travel around, but I would always see LA as home. And I'd been living in Laurel Canyon in a beautiful house in the West Hollywood Hills. If you know where and what Laurel Canyon is, it's a place that's deeply synonymous with the 50s and 60s music scene. A lot of great bands, Mamas and Papas, The Doors, they all sort of had their time of burgeoning living in that area. So there was, a really, really great feeling living there. Even today, there was a lot of musicians, a lot of artists that I would connect with. And I would very rarely leave my little village, my little mountain village of Laurel Canyon. I could trick myself into thinking that I lived in a mountain town. My view off the balcony was just stunning trees and sure, quite a number of houses compared to what I look at now, but still, it was wonderful. My rent was up for renewal, and I would have either had to extend for another year or find somewhere else to live. And around this time as well, my girlfriend and I had been considering moving in together. And for various reasons, she couldn't move into the house that I was living in. We would have had to move somewhere else. And she lived in too small of an apartment in Silver Lake, and an apartment. I would never want to live in an apartment again in my life. So we started planning, well, what are we going to do? We considered moving to Lake Arrowhead, which is a sort of northeast of Los Angeles, and is in winter like a sort of ski place. It's very snowy, and in summer is sort of kind of just like a beautiful California high, almost like Northern California looking place. Close enough to LA, but in the end we decided against that, and we definitely didn't want to live in the city. I would never want to live in a city again. So we started thinking of other places. Maybe we could move to Tennessee, maybe we could move to Texas, and maybe we could move to Florida. And so we were thinking of all of these places, and we decided to do something a little crazy. A number of years before this, my girlfriend had been in the shower, and she had had this intuitive hit that she needed to go to Costa Rica. Anyways, as most intuitive hits happen for most people, she just stored it away in a file. And didn't think too much of it, continued living her life in LA. And so anyways, when we were then thinking about where we wanted to move, she said, why not Costa Rica? And instantly, I was like, yes, we should move there. Bearing in mind, again, neither of us had ever been here. Neither of us really even knew where it was. It was somewhere between North and the South of America, somewhere here, blah, 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 blah. But we didn't really know what it was. I'd seen maybe pictures and videos, and people say, oh, I was in Costa Rica and I saw the howler monkeys. And I go, yeah, cool, all right, mate. But we decided to do it. So we came out here, and we had like a couple of months leading up to coming out here where we decided that if we were going to move here, we should probably sell as much of our stuff as possible to make it as easy of a move as possible. And also, whatever stuff we didn't sell, we should put in storage so that we could come out here, do a recce, figure out where it was we were actually going to live, like what our life was going to look like before we shipped out whatever shit we still had. So we put it in storage, and leading up to here, we decided that we were just going to start in an area that a friend of ours, who's a personal chef, she had been chefing for a family who lived around here or had been spending some time around here. And she had mentioned there was this place called the Valle Diamante, the Diamond Valley. And she said, start there. So anyways, we book our flights to San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica. And rather synchronistically as well, seeing as we were just arriving in a new country that knew no one and really knew nothing. I speak Spanish fluently because I grew up in Spain, but my girlfriend doesn't, and we know nothing about the country or nothing about what to do or where to go here. So it was kind of nice that one of her friends reached out to her, really just by chance, and said like, hey, I know we haven't talked in ages, and I don't know what you're up to in your life, but I'm working with these people who are throwing a retreat for, very meta here, retreat leaders looking to throw retreats. And this girl had no idea what my girlfriend was up to, where she was, what she was, whatever, blah, 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 blah. She said, but the only thing is, this retreat, in order to come to it, it's free if you're trying to throw a retreat. But in order to come to it, you would have to be in San Jose in Costa Rica on, the 18th of March. She didn't know we were moving to Costa Rica. She had no idea. So there was just this bizarre synchronicity, which was that, like, the day that we actually were arriving in this country anyway, we'd already booked our flights. We then had this opportunity, this free gift of something to do straight away, which was for an all-inclusive, all expenses paid trip to the middle of the rainforest on a raft. I'll get to that. It was a pretty wild experience. So anyways, we arrive in Costa Rica, 18th-ish of March, and we go straight to the hotel. And as I said, like, we arrived on the day that the itinerary said we would need to. 18th, go to the hotel, because then the morning after we're going to the jungle. So the morning after, have some lovely breakfast. Something which I realized probably a bit later than that was that there's only really 1 or 2 or 3 dishes that they have in here in Costa Rica. And one of them is gallo pinto, which is like beans and rice and plantains and all that. So I had some very good gallo pinto. But then we get in this bus, and this bus drives us like 3 hours northeast of San Jose, maybe more just east. And eventually we get to what is called the river put-in. Now, I was aware, I had been told that we were going to be rafting, that there was going to be some amount of whitewater rafting. And I can't say that I was necessarily afraid or frightened, but I was definitely mildly anxious when we arrived at the river put-in, and they give us our helmets, and they give us our life vests and all that, and they say, oh, right, so has anybody here whitewater rafted before? And almost everybody puts their hand up, and I'm just like, oh, well, no, I technically haven't, no. And he's like, okay, cool, well, listen up. Here are all the things you need to do so that you don't die, so you don't drown. And, obviously the guy was playing a little bit, but to some extent, it was the most extreme of activities I'd done in at least a few months, should we say. So anyways, that's all done. We jump in the rafts and we start going down these rapids. And we whitewater raft for about, I'm just going to start calling it rafting now. Just, it's expected that it's whitewater, okay? And we go down this river for about 2 hours. We stop halfway through and like walk up and go to this waterfall. Just, let me just paint a picture for you. This is like virgin rainforest. Like, it's just naked. There is no power lines. There's no signs of human beings. There's no trash. There is nothing. You can't see or hear anything that would give you any indication that you are not in like an Indiana Jones movie. So we're going down here, we get off and we go and jump in this crazy waterfall. And on the way, one of the guys there who's like works for the thing, he was like, have you ever seen this kind of plant before? And it's just this like, it looks like a thing with a bunch of leaves. And you stroke it and it all closes. Like, all of the leaves close in just this like kind of sexy way, if I'm being honest. Like, it's like, and then there are these butterflies that are the size of my face. And there are flowers hanging off of plants that just look like aliens. And I'm sure you know about me already, even if I've never said it, that I love nature. Most of my videos, if I get the chance, I end up shooting with some sort of like beautiful natural backdrop, because I think it more adequately underpins what I'm trying to convey, more so than a room. But anyways, I have never seen nature like Costa Rica. Moving here was absolutely mind-blowing, because the fruits, the animals, the plants, all of these things are so beyond what I'm used to and what my mind is able to comprehend. You see some plants here where you're just like, it's crazy. So anyways, we raft all the way down to this retreat center. And then when we're there, we have, I think, like 3 or 4 days of these activities. They take us waterfall climbing. So we go and, I went off with some slightly more adventurous people while some stayed at home, and we climbed up waterfalls with ropes, like barefoot with ropes, climbing up waterfalls and going up into this canyon, and then jumping from tops of waterfalls into pools below. And we went tubing down the river and spinning, like down these rapids. And we went for nighttime hikes where the guy showed us like super deadly snakes and crazy spiders that are just like, if you're afraid of spiders, these things would fucking kill you. Not necessarily because they would, but because you'd have a heart attack. But anyways, we do all of this just nuts adventure stuff. And needless to say, like this idea, like, oh yeah, babe, let's move to Costa Rica. Needless to say, it starts out pretty well. It starts out with us being supported in this experience, in this adventure by some sort of unseen force that, you know, I would be hard pressed to say that I didn't feel while all of this was happening that this was a gift. This was a sign that coming here was meant to be. And this has actually been, as much as my conscious mind has tried to dissuade me from the fact that I should be here, this has actually been our experience, is that the world has opened up for us and given us so much for taking this chance of moving to Costa Rica. But I'll get back to that. So anyways, we had this wild trip, you know, it's like 5 hours rafting out. And at that point, we're so disconnected from the outside world. It had only been like 5 days that we had left the world. But as we start getting down towards the end of the rafting place, as we get to the put out, or take out, I believe it's called, you start to see, you know, you start to go under bridges and the trucks going by, and you see a little bit of trash on the side of the river, and it hurt so bad. Like, it hurt immeasurably to see like these giant trucks going by and just like piles of trash beside the river. It was weird, you know, like we'd become so accustomed to just this naked, raw rainforest. And yeah, anyways, also the food was amazing there, might I just add. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Crazy, crazy kitchen. You know, I'll probably post a couple of pictures here in the video of what this place looked like. But the kitchen there, giant range, big fridge and stuff. All of this was hydro powered, by the way. Everything that you see in this place, every single object had to be rafted in. So they have these like expert rafters that brought these giant refrigerators, these giant range cookers, everything, every single thing, every single object in this place. You're there and you're like, how did you do this? And they just fucking raft it in. Oftentimes in like rain and crazy, crazy conditions. Anyways, we arrive at the takeout position. We get a bus back to the capital, San Jose. And we're on to our next trip, our next experience now. And the chef, the private chef, a friend of ours who had suggested that we start in the area that we now live, she had also arrived in Costa Rica on the day that we had. But instead of coming with us to the retreat, she had then rented a car and driven down. I've got a really itchy nose for some reason. She had then driven down to sort of the southern tip of the country to a place called Pavones, which if you're a surfer, you'll know is, I believe, the second longest left in the world, which, as I understand it, means the second longest left breaking wave in the world for surfing. Very nice. So we hired a car, and then on our way down there, because it was going to be like, I don't know, 8-hour drive, we decided to stop in a little place called Chiripó, which Chiripó is a mountain nearby-ish to here, and my girlfriend and I stayed at a place there for 2 nights. We rented a beautiful little cottage, like a wooden house. I wonder if I have any pictures or videos. We rented a beautiful house up there and just basked in how stunning the landscape was. The drive there wasn't so great. We had to drive on this sort of like really windy mountain road, and it was very, very grey and cloudy and misty, and she got quite car sick. And anyways, less said about that drive, the better. But we really enjoyed being in this house. It was stunning. You know, it was like mountain vibes now. So where we had gone from jungle, this was semi-jungle, still Costa Rica, but it was like mountain, like sweeping mountain views. So we spent some time there, very nice, jumped in the car, and then drove down for the first time through where we now live. So the biggest city to near where I live is called Pérez Celedón, also called San Isidro El General. But it's, I'm going to be real here, pretty horrible little place just up north, northeast of where we are. But driving from there to the coast, there's just one road, this long, windy mountain road. And on that long, windy mountain road are a bunch of villages, as like the ones that I now live in. And also on a map, it's kind of funny because the chef friend of ours, she'd said, you want to go and explore places like Tinamastes, Platanillo, and actually that's all she said. She said those 2 places. And you look on a map, and you see this road going through, and then you see Tinamastes, you see Platanillo, and if you zoom in on a map, you would expect where the name of that village is. You would expect to, as you zoom in, see some amount of like town some amount of conglomeration of buildings indicating that there's something there. You zoom in, there's nothing. It's just a road, and maybe like a tiny little bit of grey on either side that indicates a couple of shops. So, it was funny to think that these places, I grew up in tiny villages in Spain. I grew up in like very, very, very small villages in Mallorca. And so it was nice after going from LA to then drive through these places that in theory we were going to come and look for a place to live in when we left. But to drive through them, and it's like a one road town, whatever you call it, like a one horse town. There's a couple of shops. Anyways, blah, blah, beside the point. We do the road for the first time, coming from Chiripo all the way down here, down this crazy mountain road. It takes about an hour or so, maybe like an hour. And we haven't seen the sea yet. We've seen water with the river. We've had a lovely experience with all of the different nature, but we haven't seen the sea. So as we start coming down here, we go through Tinamastes and Platanillo, like the villages that we may end up living in. And we go down, blah, 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 blah. It's just beautiful, beautiful weather. And boom, all of a sudden we get to the coast. And it's humid and it's hot and it feels like a tropical paradise. And needless to say, there's crazy birds and oh, it was just heaven. And this was end of March, I think. So it's like spring-ish, I guess. Or maybe fall. It's weird because summer now, it's February. December and January and February, that's summer here, I think. But anyway, so the weather was wonderful, whatever it was. And we go and we start to see what it's like to be beside the beach here. And the beaches, oh my God, they look like fucking Robinson Crusoe castaway shit, where you've just got these mad palm trees and this sand contrasting with the sea. And back then we didn't really massively have like a lot of grey skies. I quite like the grey skies that we have even now on some days, where you'll have like just this contrast of like the most stunning raw jungle with these ominous clouds that may or may not rain. And if it does rain, it rains very shortly, very intensely. But needless to say, we get in the car and then from the beach here, it was maybe another 3 hours drive down to Pavones, where we went and met our friend. And she'd rented this little Airbnb. She said, oh, it's a really cool little cabin house that we're all going to be fine staying in. We get down there and this area, Pavones, like it really starts to feel like you're going past the bounds of where past sort of the end of civilization, past the end of any form of paved roads, and past the end of people giving any fuck about potholes. Like the little bridges that go over rivers there are mind-blowing. Like it's almost just like a little piece of metal that somebody's just folded between. And you start to see no businesses. But we were actually told, get gas here, because once you go past that, there is no gas. And it's like an hour and a half of just driving deep into like almost the bush. There's no police stations, there's no hospitals, there's like barely any shops. But anyways, we go down there, we stay in this little cabin house that is so hot, it's so humid, there's so many bugs just biting you consistently. And while we enjoyed it, there wasn't too much to do down there. Now I'm into surfing, so it probably would be more fun to actually do some surfing if I'd been down there, but it was just very, very oppressive. So anyways, we did all of this, but we had no plan still of where we were going to go next, what we were going to do. We were there in this sort of like deep, oppressive, humid, very low jungle. Well, we did meet some nice people. We met some very cool, dare I say it, weird and wacky characters who live down there. People from Canada, some people from Hawaii and such. So we met some very cool people. Who have actually continued to be good friends and who we see, they come up here, a 3-hour drive, 4-hour drive isn't that much, when you have to do it. But anyway, so we met a couple of people. The chef friend, who I must also say is just the best connector on earth. She knows everybody in every part of the world, whether it's in high society or tiny unknown beach towns. She somehow manages to meet and know and connect every person. She knew someone who had a house that they were trying to sell around here, in this area, in this Valle Diamante. And why the house was for sale was because the owners were quite unwell and living in the United States, and they had become sick, and they wanted to sell up the house so that they could stay in the United States. Anyway, they were selling it for like a stupid price, like so cheap for what it was. But we reached out, and she spoke to the people about whether or not it would be possible to rent the house in the meantime. And they said, yeah, sure, 50 euros a night, which works out as like 1,500, not euros, sorry, dollars, $1,500 a night, which I'd been paying like I'd been paying $1,350. Well, we'd been paying $5,500 a month, me and 3 other friends in LA, in like an epic house. And obviously it was an amazing house, but it was just for a room. So the fact that we got to rent out this crazy motherfucking house with just this nuts pool and this view of like, I think the tallest waterfall in Central America, just off our balcony, and a beautiful garden with crazy animals. We got to rent this out for like $1,500 a month. It's crazy. So we rented that place and we lived there for 3-ish weeks with the intention of, while we were living there, looking for a house to move into. And it was very nice living there, although none of the locks worked. So it was impossible to lock any of the doors while we were sleeping or going out and leaving our laptops and all that. So there was an element of fear. Also, we didn't really know the area. We were like 30 minutes down a dirt road. Like, not a nice, soft dirt road. In those days, this road, I say in those days, this was like 9 months ago. I'm talking about it like it was 9 years ago. But still, in those days, and I say that because they've now fixed part of this road, but we'll get to that. In those days, we didn't know what Costa Rica was like. We had heard that it's not a super dangerous place, but you should be careful, like, you know, you might get robbed. I mean, it's the same everywhere. As I always say, like, you're far more likely to get fucked up in downtown LA these days. Even just regular LA, you're probably far more likely to get burgled in LA or have some laser burn your house down than you are here. So I used to sleep with the knife block beside my bed, and that was quite a funny experience. Anyway, so in those days we also didn't really know how to live here. So we would buy just enough that we would eat for a couple of days, and then we would run out of food, and we'd have to do the hour-long drive to the shop, which is an hour back. It was, a 2-hour round-trip drive is quite something. Anyways, while we were doing that, we were also looking for houses. And one of the houses, or many of the houses that we ended up finding available to look at, were in a place called Ojochal, which is like 2 hours from where we were. So that was just such a long trip. Fucking hell. So we would go and look at these houses, and I have to say, they were really, really some beautiful houses that we were looking at. But it seemed to be in Ojochal, like quite far away from where we thought that we wanted to be in this Diamante Valley. We'd also heard from a couple of people that, Ojochal's like full of gringos, like it's the place where you're always going to get robbed. It's very dangerous out there. And, so, we went into it with this mindset of the fact that it's like, you're sure to get robbed. And having it now lived there, I can say that is utter bullshit. Absolute bullshit. And it's the kind of thing that somebody says when they have just no idea of what they're talking about. And they say it with such like bullish confidence. Yes, there's a bunch of gringos there. There's also plenty of non-gringos, probably just as much of an even distribution as there is around here in this area. I'm just going to close my door. We were looking at these places, and we were just trying to find a space to live for a while. We find this epic house, this just pretty giant 4-bedroom American sort of built house in Ojochal that just looked out over the sea. And we had crazy view for $2,000 a month. This was now my first experience of living in like a house with just sea views. And it was amazing. We rented it for 3 months and it was great. The only issue was that the owners of this place, or also sort of just the area that it was built in, there seemed to be like a lot of old American people. And those old American people had, I guess, the desire to make their home in the jungle rather than like make their home with the jungle, to make their home in the jungle. Or on the jungle, or in place of the jungle, or in spite of the jungle. I don't know. So they'd cleared so much of the land. And while it was beautiful, there was a real feeling of the fact that it wasn't really the experience that we were coming here for. We wanted more of the jungle. Not just that, like, well, you could walk to it or you could drive to the jungle, but that we were living in the jungle. And it didn't also help that just probably a stone's throw away was a construction site. That when we actually went to look at the house, they were like, oh, they're pretty quiet. You know, soon they're going to put a roof on it and then it will be really silent. They were very loud. Very, very, very loud. And it would start at like 6 a.m, Monday through Saturday, with banging and sawing metal. And that started to really get the best of us, should we say. And so it then turned out that a retreat center near here, an amazing space. The people who owned this retreat center were going back to the United States for a bit, and they needed somebody to rent out the whole retreat center, basically. And on this retreat center, there was sort of like 2 cabin houses and a main house. And we didn't want the 2 little cabins, but we looked at this house and it was just amazing. And coincidentally, it was up for rental for 3 months, just after our other one, bar a week, ended. So we snapped that up and we were like, okay, cool. And amazingly, this retreat center was in Platanillo. So we've now ended up in the place that we wanted to really be. And I have to say, living there was a truly soul-healing experience. I don't mean that in some silly, my soul feels healed. I genuinely mean that it was such a cathartic experience, because we were in the middle of rainy season. And by rainy season here, I mean that it rains almost consistently, or it rains every day, masses, for a couple of months. And so to be in a place that was so beautiful, the view, I'm hoping that when I'm now editing this video, I've put in a couple of pictures and videos to show you, but the view that we had at this place and the experience of waking up here in this very secluded private property for a few months, while we figured out really what it is that we wanted to do, whether we really wanted to be here. Because there's actually an aspect of this that I forgot to mention, that when we were living in that previous American house, when we were living in that house with the sea view, I was unsure if I wanted to be here. There was an aspect of being here that felt like, what the fuck are we doing? You know, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable being here. You can't get things posted to you because you don't have an address. Houses don't have addresses. You know, you can't just have things delivered by Amazon. I know, wow, poor boy. There's not that much choice in terms of shops. You have to drive everywhere and it's so far. So anyway, there was all sorts of things where I was just missing America, you know, and I would have liked to have gone back to the United States perhaps. And we actually had to go back to Los Angeles because I was playing in a festival. So we went back to the home we just left after being away for 6 months, maybe a little less than 6 months. And I went to play this festival and we were torn because we were like, what are we doing? Should we be in Costa Rica? And we were putting up with a lot of power cuts at that time as well. And when the power cuts, if you're on a Zoom call, which is how I do a lot of my work, you're just fucked. And so we started really weighing up the option of, well, maybe we don't stay here. Maybe we leave. And also we knew that we were going back post that festival trip to rainy season when shit gets crazy. We're told. We hadn't experienced it, but we were told it's going to get crazy. It's going to rain all the time. So we come back, and this is then we move into this retreat center property. I say retreat center. They do retreats there, but really it's just like a property with a big house on and then 2 smaller cabinas. But so we move there, and it allows for the space inside of ourselves to just like, okay, well, we can't really go anywhere because it's raining. We've rented this place up front for 3 months. What do you do? And so we both got to work on our individual passions. Obviously, you know what I do. I make music and I help people with their music. My girlfriend was working on her own sort of heart-led offering. And we were just there. And it allowed for such a sense of peace, such a sense of not being disturbed. Sure, maybe there was very loud rain. Sure, maybe you couldn't necessarily go to the shop because the river was flooded. But it allowed for this just very simple sense of gratitude for life, for being alive, that I think is what changed my perspective on being here, from being a semi-fun hassle that I'm trying to get out of as quick as possible to something where I'm like, yeah, it's uncomfortable, but it's making me a better person. It's giving me a sense of purpose in my life. But I didn't fully reach that yet. We'll get to that. So anyway, we lived in that other house for a while. Very nice. I was running a course. I did a 3-month music production course that lasted the entire length of me being there. And I'm so grateful that the people who lived there had put in a backup battery. They didn't drop any calls. Everything managed to stay running just fine. Maybe I had to move some, but whatever. We then only had 3 months because the owners of that property were coming back. And we were like, fuck, we loved living here. What are we going to do now? So we found this place that I'm currently living on now on Facebook. It was a new build. Nobody had ever lived here before. And we came to look at it, and we kind of needed to get a place. We didn't really have the liberty of just kind of taking too much time. We left it quite late. And so we snapped up this place and went back to that house, and we're just thinking, God, what have we done? This one doesn't have a garden, I know. And it's a fair bit smaller. But it's a beautiful place to live, it really is. And it's been a great space to be because, okay, well, actually, I remember why. We didn't want to find a place to live in permanently. We'd been doing 3 month. Here we're going to be for 5 months. We found a place on Facebook that just is, let me tell you, is the most magical space that we could ever possibly live. And actually, that's going to be a big part of my story moving forward. But we found this place on Facebook as well that was just mind-blowing. Like, I can't tell you how insane it was. And so we reached out to the guy, and he said, oh yeah, please come and live here, but you can't move in until March. So we needed to find a place from December, January, February, March to live. So that's how we found this place. We moved in here as a temporary fix to the fact that we needed to find a place, ideally, for just 4 months. And so we moved in here. Very nice, but we moved in with this understanding of the fact that it was going to be temporary. One of the lovely things, though, is that the property we will be moving to, that house, the landlord and his wife, they live on the property too. It's a big, beautiful farm. He does jam sessions every Thursday. And actually, the people who are living in the house that I will be moving to on that property, the people who were living there before they moved out, he was a drummer, and he was a great musician who was sort of like the ringleader of the monthly jamming sessions, or sorry, the weekly jamming sessions. And the fact that he was now leaving, the landlord basically said, like, oh, you know, we're missing a band leader, because he could play all the instruments and he knew how to set up the stuff. And I said, well, I can do that. You know, like, it's literally what I do. And so I went along a couple of months ago now for my first jam session on a Thursday. And it was my first bit of routine that involved other people, and that was a thing that I could count on, that every Thursday I would be able to do. And it was just amazing to rock up. He's got some drums, he's got a bass, he's got guitar, he's got keys, he plays this amazing like MIDI wind instrument, and we just jammed. So one thing I also didn't touch on is probably one of the reasons why it felt so weird being here is for like 9 months. Sure, we met the occasional person and we did socialize. It wasn't like we were totally hermits, but we didn't have a sense of community, and it was very difficult to meet people here for a variety of reasons. One is that everybody lives in the middle of nowhere, so far away from each other, and you have to drive. Two, I think this is probably the same anywhere, but like, how do you meet people as an adult? It's tricky, you know, and unless you go and do like a pottery class and you fraternize, I mean, that is the answer, I now know, is to go and do activities and to do it open-hearted so that you meet people. And with no hook that you have to be their friends, but just to enjoy it. Anyways, so we didn't really have people in our lives. You know, it was just my girlfriend and I, we were here, we were enjoying ourselves, but it was definitely lonely in many aspects. However, going to this jam, I then met a couple of locals. I met some people who not just, bless you, not just were these people new friends, but they were also people I could connect with over one of the most important parts of my life, which is music. And it was awesome because you don't have to meet these people and do the old 30-minute howdy doody, what do you do, what's your blah, 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 blah. You just get together and you start to jam. And through the jamming, through the moments of like, oh, you know, like you playing drums and bass together and you like lock into the pocket together, or the keys in the guitar, like you have this little moment of just like accidentally playing the most beautiful thing on earth. That creates bonding. Those moments of vulnerability that are expressed through music, like that bonding creates friendship. And so, you know, I think that the music in many ways shortcutted having to go and do the old, hello, let's get to know each other. Because you get to know each other as a result of the music that you play together. Anyway, that jam session, that house, the man who lives on that property has been the catalyst, I would say, for me truly starting to feel at home here. Also, we've now been in this house since the beginning of December, and it was nice. You know, it's good. We've enjoyed it. It's sort of been a bit of a blur in some sense, other than going to that jamming session. But my mum and her husband just came to visit because it was my birthday last Friday, or the Friday before, the 24th of January. And so they came over for my birthday for like 9-ish days. And we got to experience Costa Rica through the eyes of a visitor's. And it sort of makes sense that you can appreciate something more when you're showing it to somebody who has never seen it before. Like kind of we were when we first moved here, but we did a bunch of stuff. We went snorkeling on like a boat trip to this crazy island out in the sea, and we climbed waterfalls, and we went and just did all sorts of beautiful things that involved the nature around here. And in that also just saw the country, saw our lives through somebody else's eyes, and became just so grateful for it. And the interesting thing is that on their last day was a Thursday. So I went to the jam session, and my mum and my girlfriend went and had a massage and went and had some girl time. And I took her husband to the jam session. And I just, again, had this experience through his eyes of, he was like, you know, it's very nice that you got these people you just get together and you jam. And I just had this realization. I was like, yeah, this is really, really magical. And needless to say, around the time that then they were getting ready to leave, I was seeing this place in a vastly different way than I have in the 11 months leading up to here. I started to have like a real reverence and respect and love for the discomfort, for the rawness, for the simplicity of life here, but for also the quality of the people who have decided to bring something a bit more complex to the jungle. There are amazing restaurants here. There's not a lot of them. There are amazing restaurants, amazing spaces that people have created and curated, who have come from complex places, you know, like New York and whatever. You know, there are people who have come from places of immense culture, and they've come here, and with the nature, they have collaborated with creating an amazing pizza restaurant, or they've created an amazing like noodle space, or an amazing hotel with a view. And so all this to say, I'm making this video today with a real sense of gratitude in my heart for what's happened over the past couple of days. So on Thursday at that jam session, I met nephew of the landlord, the man on the property that I lived. And this nephew was a wonderful guy, 28 years old. He was just an amazing guitarist. Fucking check him out. I wonder if I can put a link up here to his stuff. Amazing guitarist. And so we connected, and I said, oh man, we should make some music tomorrow. I don't know if you're around in Friday or Saturday. And he said, yeah, sure. So we connected over the old Instagram and such, and I left. And then he messaged me and he was like, no way, I listened to your music. And I guess, you know, I added myself on his Instagram, and then he'd seen and he knows my music. I think he even watches these videos. So hi, Asa. But yeah, on Friday, he had then messaged me to say that he was going to, and this is where really the story starts to kick off again in my perspective. He'd messaged me to say that he was going around 5 p.m. to a drum circle, like a community drum circle, and a like indigenous chanting group. And he said, you should come along. And straight away, I was like, yes. Because also, just to reiterate, we don't really know anyone here or what's going on. You know, occasionally we dip in and see people. We don't really we don't have community here, or didn't have community here. And so when he said, like, come along, you know, there's like a bunch of people, they get together every week and we play drums and have a fire ceremony and all that kind of shit. I was like, okay, cool. And then 5 seconds after my body had given me a yes, I was like, no, I don't think I should. And partly it was because I know that I could have quite easily stayed here. Friday night, stay in, my girlfriend's working, she wouldn't have been able to come anyway. But I could just stay here and I could work. I could work on some music, I could create a video, I could do something that I know. And by I know, I mean as in that I know how it's going to end. But the idea of going and meeting a bunch of strangers, particularly in a setting that makes me feel moderately uncomfortable, like this sort of like semi-spiritual ceremonial get-together thing. So I went to saying no, but I was like, I'll rain check. I'll tell you in an hour if I'm going to come. So I sat with it, and I knew that I should go, but I also felt very uncomfortable about it. But I was trying to work out like which part of me I should listen to. And I realized that it was absolutely the initial yes that I needed to follow. So I said, yes, I'll be there. And I got in the car and I went over there like, kind of like, not afraid, but like genuinely like anxious as fuck about this prospect. If I didn't know who was going there. He'd also never been to this drum circle before, but he knew some people who were going to it. So it wasn't even like I knew a person who, yeah. So I get in the car and I drive over there and I go to just far off a dirt road. Like I've sort of been to that area, but never to where this actual house was that it was happening. And it was so beautiful up there. Like it's still in the Valle Diamante. Like I see where they call it the Diamond Valley. So I go up there and my new friend, he hasn't arrived yet, or so far I don't know if he's arrived. And also I don't have a working phone when I'm out of the house. So I have to go there and I have this sort of just trust that, okay, do I sit in the car? And so I do sit in the car for like a minute and I'm like, oh, maybe he'll turn up and then I can go in with him. And then I get out of the car and I'm like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna go in. And so I hear these voices in a garden on the other side of a fence, and I like, okay, I don't know if I go in this gate, and I walk around a little bit. Then I turn around, and there's two kids. This one kid has this giant fucking knife, like a machete, and he's sort of just like twisting it, like putting it in his mouth, and he's like, who are you? And I said, oh, hello, like I'm here for the drum circle. And he's like, okay, cool, yeah, that's here. And he's like maybe, I don't know, a 9-year-old with a giant fucking machete of a knife. And he says, it's through that. And so I have this feeling in my stomach. I'm like, do I go in? Do I just walk into this gate with no knowing of what's going to happen? Or do I wait for the one person that I slightly know to go in there? And so I was like, I'm just going to wait in the car. So I went and sat in the car and for 30 seconds. And then I thought, I know this is a very long-winded way of saying it. I'm just trying to explain how like torn I was. I was like, no, I'm going to go in there. I'm going to go make myself uncomfortable. So I got up and I just wandered in there. And there were some people that sort of turned around and like looked at me as if to say like, who are you? And I said, hello, is this where the drum circle is happening? And they were like, yes, this is. And I introduced myself, you know, they welcomed me, said, thank you so much for coming, had a little chatter, blah, 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 blah. And then flash forward. We then have maybe about an hour until it starts. And then the guy who's leading the drum circle says that there's only a couple of rules. One is that you can't leave once it's started. So if you want to leave now, leave. And he didn't explain how long it was going to be, just that once it started, you can't leave until it's finished. And also you can't get up once it started. You can't remove your spot because you have to stay in this circle. And so I was like, okay, fair enough. And basically, it was a wonderful experience. I could go far more into detail of the actual experience, but I'm not going to. There was a lot of drumming and there was a lot of indigenous songs in various languages, like there's some like Native American, like Lakota, and there was some Yawanawa songs from the Brazilian tribe. Anyway, wonderful songs, and without really having to know the words, somebody would start the song and you would do your best to sing along with it. And it was like a pretty psychedelic experience. You know, there was a little bit of cannabis oil involved and cannabis powder, which I'd never experienced as well before, which had a little powder mouth. But it was a really marvelous experience. Then afterwards, and he had mentioned this before, there was going to be a sharing circle. Ugh. I'm a confident person, you know, like I like to express my feelings, I'm fine with that. But there's a certain sense of dread that comes out when you mention a sharing circle. And I also just want to now preface the rest of my story about this drum circle with something that, like, I will admit I hold judgment around. I can be very open-minded, very open-hearted, But at the same time, there is a sense of judgment that exists strongly within me that is very focused on a specific sect of humanity, and that is spiritual people. And for God knows how many years, I end up in these super spiritual events. You know, I don't know how. I mean, maybe you can tell me in the comments, but I don't think I come across as some person who's like, namaste, brother. You know, let's clear those chakras. And like, I'm not making music to clear people's chakras. Like, whether or not that's the actual effect of my music is different. But anyways, clearly there's something about my energetic fingerprint which just attracts these experiences where I get booked to play at a lot of festivals and music events that are these sort of conscious spiritual festivals. And these events tend to bring a certain, and I'm going to be very narrow-minded and like going to be very sweeping here, they tend to bring a specific person. Again, I'm saying I'm being narrow-minded here before I then try and open my mind. But this narrow-minded person is the kind of person who will say things like, yeah, there's a super high vibe here, and like my energy is peaking. I'm like really integrating with you, brother, on like a heart and soul led path, man. I can't even do it, but you know what I mean. Is there's that spiritual hippie shit that they bring their crystals and they have the way that I could put it is that there is a script. There is like a bingo card of words and terms and smells and things that they wear and things that they do and things that they eat. There is a bingo card that like I always tend to end up at these places where everybody is calling bingo 24/7. And I don't necessarily maybe outwardly come across as like mad judgy about this, but internally like I'm judging the fuck out of it. I'm like, oh, you know, like it's these spiritual hippie woo-woo people who introduce themselves as like, hi, I'm Rainbow Unicorn, and I am a level 5 Reiki healing specialist, and I'm a starseed, and blah, blah, blah. And I think in some ways I have a right to think it's bollocks what they're talking about. Because I think that the most spiritually advanced, that's a very weird way of saying it, and I don't mean it like that, but I'd say maybe the most spiritually aware people that I've met don't follow a script, or they don't feel the need to fit into a container that says spiritual person. And those people can be grounded, they can smoke, they can swear, they can fart, they can do almost everything that isn't what is expected of a spiritual person, wearing the linen and the star of whatever, the flower of life necklace, and doing the whole very, very, very long soft hugs and staring into your eyes for just a bit too long. Anyways, I now want to jump back to the fact that when we had this sharing circle, this is what I was thinking. You know, I was thinking, oh God, this is what it's going to be. And it went round, and a couple of the people before me used their bingo cards. They said, you know, I really needed to blow off some of the cobwebs around my root chakra today. And so I, you know, set some intentions with my crystals, and I wore red so that I could come here, blah, 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 blah. And for the first time, I think because I came there with an open heart, in the sense of the fact that like I don't really know anyone, like I don't really have many friends here, and I came there with this open heart. For the first time, I managed to see what they meant, or I managed to understand what the people meant rather than the words that they used to mean it. And I saw, instead of a person in a box using a script to fit in, I saw a person with a heart that wanted to connect with other people, that wanted to like be open, be friendly, be not just friendly, but like wish everyone well. And the words that they used just happened to be like the color palette that they had wished to express this message in. That being said, I still don't love the whole, you know, namaste, brother, integrating one's soul through the starseed of the consciousness, blah, 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 blah. I still think it's bollocks most of the time. But for the first time, I really I felt less judgmental around it. I felt excited to be meeting some new people and open to the prospect of the fact that some of the new people I meet very well might be spiritual people. Fuck, I'm just noticing that my mouth is going out of time. There we go, I've done some claps. Anyways, at this drum circle, met a bunch of lovely people, really nice, got up, left, came home, and... Oh, other side note. So, I'd had girlfriends over the years. You know, I seemed to find myself in these relationships that seemed to just be the same patterns again and again and again with different characters. Obviously, I was playing the same pattern in these situations just as much as the people who I was picking. But still, before my current girlfriend, I went through a period of sort of swearing off relationships. That's it. I'm never going to love again. I don't need that. Blah, 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 blah. After a certain point of kind of like working on myself, working with myself, working on loving myself, one day I had this very conscious moment, this very, very aware, conscious moment where I opened my heart and I opened my mind. I made clarity on the fact that I was going to meet someone and I was going to love them and I was going to have love in my life. And so a couple of days after that, the whole situation with my girlfriend began, and this is a mind-blowing relationship. Like, I can't tell you how different it is to love and be loved by this wonderful woman. But anyways, the reason why I say that is I had that situation the other day with what led to, I think, the drum circle, is that I had this moment where I was like, open heart, open mind, I'm going to meet people. I'm going to meet friends. I'm going to be a friend. And that day after is then when the drum circle appeared out of nowhere. Now, yesterday, Asa, the nephew of the landlord, the amazing guitarist, he came over and he was jamming. Actually, I went to go pick him up at this very cool retreat center down the road and came back here and we had a little jam. And he told me about this guy called Troy, this dude in the area, who I had to meet, who was a great vocalist, great sort of Renaissance man, all-round character. And we had literally just got in, and he said, oh yeah, maybe Troy said that he would like to come over. And then I hear a knock on the door, and I go out, and this guy is already here. Somehow just like ended up at the house. And he comes in, and it turns out, you know, we have a lovely jam, we're playing keys, playing percussion, playing guitar, but it turns out that like, a lot of these people know people that I know, like from all over the world. This is like David Satori and Yamanjo and Mose, all of these people in this, there we go, in my conscious music circle that somehow I've ended up in. Everybody knows each other. It's this tiny world. So yesterday we just had this amazing day, just like jamming and getting to know each other. And I finally felt as though this was like the beginning of really laying down like roots, making like proper friends here. And they were then going to an event at a place over yonder, and it was pouring with rain. And I said, you know what, guys, I'll fucking drive you. So I drove them over there, partly because, selfishly, I wanted to listen to my audiobook on the way home. And I don't listen to it when I'm at home, I only listen to it in the car. But I drove them there, and I left them off, and I was driving back, and I just had this moment looking out as it was pouring with rain in the jungle, the sound of the cicadas, which are just starting now. That's why I recorded this video in the morning, because it's just mind-numbingly loud later in the day. But I just had this moment where I was like, fuck, this is awesome. I love living in Costa Rica. So a couple of thoughts that I just wanted to share before I wrap this up as well is that if you keep living the life that you can anticipate, if you keep doing the things that you know lead to the results that you regularly have, things don't change. And that's totally fine if the life that you're living, you love. You're excited by it, you know, the things that you do, the people that you do, the work that you do, that where you live, all of these things. If you love that, then that's fine. Keep doing what you're doing. But if there's ever a moment in your life where you yearn for something different than what you currently have, whether that is like a relationship, whether that's a different job, whether that's living in a different place, nothing's going to change until you change, until you make the decision to do something radical, to upend what you know for comfort and present yourself with an entirely new set of options. And so if I think back to, I loved my life in LA. I really did. You know, it was great. But however fabulous my life was, it had got to the point where it was feeling almost a little stale. And so just selling all of the stuff that we could and just upping and moving to the jungle, having never come here before, having never even lived together before, to just come to the jungle and live here, it's been the fucking most amazing adventure of my life yet. And to now, almost a year on, be starting to integrate myself with all of the other crazy motherfuckers who have decided to do the same thing. All of the insane people who have decided to leave civilized society to move to a very raw and undeveloped part of the jungle. I am so excited. Are you joking? What a fucking life. Whatever it is that you want to do, you can do it. Some things may feel harder and further away than maybe you think they are, but you can do it. There's usually always a pretty simple approach to doing it as well, and we try and make everything so complex, but man, I fucking love living in Costa Rica. And if you are ever in the area, fucking let me know. I'd love to give you some tips on where to go and what to see around here. It is a beautiful place. But in the meantime, this has been a 56-minute video, so I'm going to wrap it up here and hopefully be able to fix the mouth-moving latency issue. I hate that fucking shit. I'm going to try and figure out why it is. But yeah, happy Sunday. Happy creating, friends.